Guys, do you think that President Biden can send out the forward stimulus payments? And to be honest with you, I really believe that President Biden has to do something about the crazy cost of living. The rising cost of gas, groceries, and even food. And the only way to do this is for President Biden to send out the forward stimulus check of $2,000 or even $1,400. President Biden has to send out stimulus before the end of the year, before things get a lot worse next year for so many of you guys. And I'm on your team here, everybody. I'm doing all that it takes. I'm doing all the research it takes to find the most up-to-date, reliable stimulus check information. I will always do my best in providing you guys with the most important stimulus news, Social Security updates, stimulus check updates, and a relief check payment update that you have to know. This channel is where it is at. I will always do my best in providing you guys with the most up-to-date and reliable stimulus news. So, be sure to continue watching if you want the most up-to-date, reliable stimulus check information. First of all, the Supplemental Poverty Measure. This is another form of stimulus checks, everybody. It began back in 2009 and takes into account certain non-cash government assistance, tax credits, and needed expenses. The supplemental poverty rate for children was the lowest on record since the measure began, and without the enhanced child tax credit, the rate would have only fallen to 9%. And some 5 million people were lifted out of poverty because of this credit. This credit is similar to a stimulus check and is something that you guys should take care of. And overall, the supplemental poverty rate was 7.8% for 2021. That's down from 9.2% a year earlier. The reduction in poverty, however, will likely be short-lived since the beefed up credit was only in effect for 2021. Now, the supplemental rate compares with the official poverty rate, which was only 11% overall in 2021. Now, this official poverty rate for children was 15%, and also the poverty rate among the elderly rose 10% as well. This is likely because a larger share is on fixed incomes, everybody, that are not keeping up with the pace with inflation. As we can all see, the major problem here in America is inflation, and stimulus checks are the only way that people can help out. Now, this is likely because a larger share is fixed on incomes that are not keeping up with inflation, and still, Social Security has kept 26 million people, the majority of them senior citizens, out of poverty. So it's an important bill. Also, median household income in 2021 was $70,000, and not statistically different than a year earlier, even as inflation started to soar last year. This follows a 2.9% decline in median income in 2020, the first year of the crisis and the first statistically significant drop since 2011. So while the overall number of workers didn't change, the number of full-time, year-round workers included and increased by 11 million. However, inflation-adjusted median earnings, this means inflation checks, of those workers decreased 4%. So the supplemental poverty measure has taken on increased important measures in the recent years, particularly when Congress decided to send out multiple stimulus bills in 2020. So as part of this American Rescue Plan that President Biden signed, Congress enhanced the first child tax credit for 1 year. To be eligible to receive the stimulus card benefits, you must be a Chicago resident and have a valid city sticker for your vehicle. Now, data provided by the City of Chicago suggests that the median household income for a family of 4 is $93,000. According to local Chicago news stations, 75% of these cards will prioritize residents in community areas that have higher mobility hardship, while the remaining 25% will be distributed citywide. Now, costly gasoline prices could hamper the United States' economic recovery if it continues. So central is the price of fuel to the household budgets for millions of people. However, with an influence of factors sparking the recent price increase, a quick remedy seems unlikely. Inflation rates have been increasing sharply since August 2021 and have been out of the normal 2 to 4% range for a full year. The Consumer Price Index rose 8.5% for the year ending in March. And now, Jerome Powell said last week, it is our job to make sure that inflation of that unpleasant high nature doesn't get entrenched in the economy. This was after he announced a half-point interest rate hike to combat inflation. Still, people are struggling with rising costs, everywhere from the grocery store to the gas pump. Keeping prices stable is part of the Fed's mandate, but so far inflation has kept increasing higher. The GOP is already leveraging inflation to weaken Democrats heading into the midterm elections, as they argue that Biden and congressional Democrats have only caused the problem. Do you agree with this, everybody? Tell me in the comments down below. We have a ton of good news, Social Security benefits, SSI, and SSDI information that you want to know. Stay until the end of the video because you definitely don't want to miss out on this. Workers in other states will be receiving a $750 stimulus check, and just a few days ago, the office of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz confirmed that a bipartisan agreement had been made to provide frontline workers and small business owners with additional stimulus checks. In a statement, the governor said the state of Minnesota continues to show the country that the divided legislature can still come together to get things done. This bill provides hazard pay to frontline workers and relief for small business owners. Speaker Melissa Horman also said that the priority of the new package is to ensure that frontline workers who went to work every day, even during the worst days of the crisis, received the bonuses that they were promised last year. Now, the plan was formally approved by the Minnesota House of Representatives in February. Now, Republicans and Democrats originally couldn't agree on who could be eligible for the checks, with Democrats working to make them available to a broader range of workers. While Republicans wanted the money to be directed primarily to first responders and nurses and doctors, an estimated 667,000 workers from Minnesota will be able to claim the check. And if you've got a tax return filed, whether it was before or after the April 18th deadline, a tax refund should be headed to your way very soon. That's if you're expecting one. If you file on time, your refund money should arrive within 21 days of filing, and as long as there are no errors and you file electronically instead of direct deposit. To keep tabs on your refund, you can start tracking your refund. You can start tracking it to your bank account after the IRS begins processing your return. And the IRS has the ability to automate nearly half of tax returns. And according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, the IRS could correctly autofill an estimated 62 to 73 million returns with information that it already has. This will be covering 41% to 48% of taxpayers. So folks, if you guys found this video useful and helpful, tell me in the comments down below.
Meet this change in demand, but also to allow for social distancing and COVID safety protocols for workers. Now, as Americans have started to resume their normal lives, companies are struggling to keep up with the increased demand for goods. These supply chain issues and a worker shortage has resulted in higher prices across the economy. These issues do not fully explain some of the skyrocketing prices that we're seeing. The pandemic and the ensuing recovery have laid bare systemic problems in our economy, including market consolidation and price gouging. As our economy works to recover from the pandemic and the shocks to our supply chain, and as the world responds to Putin's reckless invasion of Ukraine, food and energy costs have skyrocketed for people around the world, including here in America and including in my district in Rhode Island.
And I thank my colleague for yielding time. Mr. Speaker, while I fully support the underlying intent of S 1098, the Joint Consolidation Loan Separation Act, I have concerns about the bill as drafted. The purpose of this bill is to protect student loan borrowers who consolidated their loans with a spouse but now seek to reverse this process. Yet, as written, this bill undermines that purpose. I am concerned this bill will hurt the very borrowers we're trying to help. We never want to see a spouse, especially one that is a victim of domestic violence, forced to be financially tied to his or her abuser. We want to give these borrowers a way out. However, we also recognize that it is not only the abused spouse who may be applying for these new consolidations. Under the Senate-passed language, when a borrower files for a new consolidated loan, he or she could potentially leave his or her spouse with the remaining balance. We must be cognizant of the fact that a borrower could use this new legislation as a weapon. This is why we need safeguards in place to ensure that both parties are not subject to potential abuse through the separation process and not just the one filing for a new consolidation. Additionally, the Department of Education has stated that it will take 12 to 18 months to implement this bill. Given the urgency of the situation that many borrowers are in, this kind of delay is unacceptable. We need to provide these borrowers with a quicker way out of their joint consolidation loan. Yet Democrats rejected the Republican solution that will give these borrowers an almost immediate separation without unnecessary paperwork that will bog down the process. Further, I'm concerned that this bill could be used by the Secretary of Education to stage an even broader takeover of student loans. It would be simpler and more straightforward to allow these loans, once separated, to remain with their current holder. but instead this legislation attempts to drive as many of these loans as possible into the government-run direct loan program. We have ample evidence to believe that the Biden Department of Education will take the inch given in this legislation and use it to go a mile. The administration's illegal expansion of the income-driven repayment program and public service loan forgiveness program, let alone Biden's student loan bailout, are evidence of that. For example, the vague language included in this bill, namely the authority for the Secretary of Education to allow for new consolidation loans if it's in, quote, the fiscal interest of the federal government, end quote. The Education Department has not been able to provide clarity on what this phrase means or how it applies to this bill, but it has been used previously by this administration to force billions of dollars worth of loans made by private lenders onto the government's books. Moreover, the president's $1 trillion transfer of wealth from hardworking taxpayers to college graduates clearly illustrates this administration had no intention of protecting the fiscal interest of the federal government. We must not create any loopholes or backdoors for the Biden administration to exploit. Transferring massive amounts of student loan debt to taxpayers is harming our economy and setting a horrible precedent for future borrowers, not to mention failing to solve the underlying problems in post-secondary education. Because of these issues, Republicans have a solution that will allow student loan servicers to separate joint consolidation loans almost immediately instead of having to wait over a year to receive relief. Our solution is a common sense and practical way to accomplish the same goal as this legislation, but more quickly and efficiently. Republicans